here we are. I'm Tom Osman, and this is Whatever Comes Next, the podcast where I explore the world of underground and independent music making. And on today's episode, I am talking with Chris Pervelis of death metal group Internal Bleeding, who have just released their latest record, Settle All Scores, on Maggot Stomp. And this is an interview that I was really looking forward to doing, partly because I think the latest record is great, but also recognizing that Chris has got decades of experience in the musical underground. I thought he's going to have so much interesting insight from the various different experiences that he's had and the kind of the turbulent times, the highs and the lows in all different aspects of navigating the music business. And so it proved to be the case. And it was a very enjoyable chat talking through the band's music, their origins, various different aspects of their history, some of the different practical things that they'd had to deal with, some funny stories from the road, for example, talking about driving around in a van in Canada and almost dying from exposure to the cold. All the kinds of things that I was hoping for and more. And I definitely got things off to a good start from Chris, seeing that I had Get in the Van by Henry Rollins on my shelf and also a Black Sabbath record, which instantly got us into various discussions that I was planning to get into anyway. So yeah, very enjoyable. Thank you very much to Chris for his time, and thank you to Dave Brenner for setting this one up. And yeah, as mentioned, Settle All Scores is out now. You can get it from Maggot Stomp on various different formats, which I will put links to in the description. And you can also see Internal Bleeding live coming next month. I think they've got some dates. And beyond that, you can follow me on all social media at Tom Osman Sounds. You can go to tomosmansounds.com for my music. You can go to Patreon, www.patreon.com/whatever comes next, if you would like to check out extra features, longer interview episodes, starting from episode 100, my DIY special, including interviews with various cool people, including Steve Austin of Today is the Day. That is all available there. There is also another 100th episode, bonus episode that I'm going to be putting out soon whenever I find the time for it. But for the time being, we are here for Internal Bleeding. That's a strange statement to make. I am going to play a track from Settle All Scores at the end of the interview, a little clip coming up right just now. But all that being said, without further ado, Chris Pervelis of Internal Bleeding, take it away. Hello, sir.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Tom, pleased to meet you.
Yeah, pleased to meet you.
I am...
I love the Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath on the back. I just noticed that. I just know, and the Get in the Van book. Two of my absolute favorite things are Black Sabbath and well, I think Henry Rollins has gone soft now, but I loved his attitude. It's what propelled me to keep this band going for so long, is because of mostly because of that book, not only because of the music.
Yeah.
That book is inspiring.
Yes, I completely agree with you. Yeah, no, absolutely. I remember, I think before I even had the actual book, I had an audio version of it and just loved listening through. I mean, just wild for me to think what it must have been like, that experience, when it was like you didn't have the networks that bands like Black Flag had created touring around. It was just kind of like,
absolutely.
I guess we're going here and we're going to see what happens.
That's how it was. I mean, we didn't come up in the 80s, but like in the early 90s, it was like that. You had, do I have 80 quarters to call somebody on a payphone and see if I can get another show? So I kind of get a little of that, but they lived an uncomfortable, balls to the wall, do or die life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like when you look back on that time for you with Internal Bleeding, is there any kind of nostalgia for you, or is it like, oh shit, that really was fucking rough?
You know what? Both. because I can look back at it and say, I can look back at it at my age where I'm 58 now. I can look back at it, and when I look back at some of the things we did, my joints hurt. And I'm like, man, that was rough. We put five guys in a car, guitars on our laps, amp heads on top of ourselves, and drove like a maniac through the night to get to a show in a small car. And like, I couldn't do that now. But and then I also look back on it and was like, that was awesome,
Yeah.
you know. So I'm on both minds, nostalgia and oh God, it was rough.
Yeah.
But when you're in your 20s, you don't think of that. When my wife always says, that's why they put 18-year-olds in the army,
Good
right?
point. Yeah.
Because you can get shot at and you're like, I'm invincible.
Yeah.
And then when you get
It's
old,
the time when you're willing to lie and sleep in a ditch. You're not really up for that when you're in your 40s and 50s.
yeah, no, no, I am totally not there anymore. If I have to, I will, and we do. I mean, we're not at the size where we get a nice, comfortable bus and this and that. So we're sleeping in a van, and it sucks, and it's uncomfortable. And I'm 6'4" and sleeping in the front seat upright with no knee space or leg room is painful nowadays. You know,
Yeah.
so
So we are here a day before Settle All Scores comes out, your latest record, and I love the record. I've
thank
got
you.
a variety of questions I want to ask you about the record, but I want to pull you back through the years a little bit first,
Okay,
and ask you kind of like a couple of questions, sort of like backstory questions. So before you had Internal Bleeding, you had Autumn Rain, right? I don't know whether you actually did you put any music out as the band?
we actually did. We put locally. We put a tape out. Three songs. Um, I think we made like 30 tapes, 40 tapes. That's it. And it was all local, like amongst friends, not not
Yeah.
not into the mail, the postal underground, but like local friends and things like that. And we just we played a couple of shows, and they were like, it was parties and things like that. But that was
Yeah.
that got me my start. Well, it
And,
didn't get me my start, but that I had other bands before that, but that was the closest thing to what Internal Bleeding became.
yeah.
Before that, I was in hardcore bands and stuff like that.
Okay, so this is kind of part of the thing I was interested to get the insight from you about. I was thinking, okay, so like you grew up in the 70s, you were a massive Black Sabbath fan, hardcore came along, bands like Black Flag. You go through a bunch of different bands yourself, and then you get to that stage where you form Internal Bleeding. And I know you had sort of like some reconfigurations before you felt like the band really sort of cemented itself, but
Right.
I'm sure that's like an oversimplification in terms of all the different stuff that you got into, but like, how do you sort of see that process that got you from first getting inspired by music and then getting to that point with Internal Bleeding where you went, right, this is the sound that I want, and it actually stuck?
Um, that's a good question. How about this? I felt like back then I was a pinball. I was bouncing around from thing to thing, and nothing was right until I finally got to a group of people who were probably better musicians than me, who could put out what I was hearing in my head. And then that's when things really clicked. And I think that's why I say it was a pinball. I was bouncing it around there. Like even when I was in my hardcore band GBA, I was putting Sabbath riffs into the music. So you'd have these fast old 80s hardcore kind of things, and then I would drop in a riff with bends and trills and things like that. So I finally went through a whole bunch of people, and I finally met guys who were like, they had a sound in their head that was similar to mine, and they were able to adopt what I was trying to do with what they were trying to do, and then it finally like clicked. But I say pinball because in the back of my head, maybe I knew, but consciously, I did not know. I
Yeah.
was bouncing around trying to chasing something that I didn't know what I was chasing, if that makes any sense to you.
Yeah, for sure. So now, fast forwarding all the way to the present and to settle all scores, this is going to be like, here's a really obvious question. What scores are you settling?
So what have we been in this game a long time, right? 30 something years. And there's a lot of people and a lot of, let's say, business entities, et cetera, who have lied to us, cheated us, robbed us, et cetera. And this is the only way to get revenge on them, is to have an album that's a giant cathartic release of all this pent up frustration and anger at I can't tell you how many times we've been fucked over by people, or people I thought were my friends stab me in the back, or stab one of my bandmates in the back. So that's what this album's about. And we don't name names, even though I could. We don't name names because we want the listener to put themselves in their own shoes and have their own kind of cathartic experience. If we explain too much, then it kind of ruins the whole. We want a kid, some kid who's into death metal or whatever, grew up, maybe he was a little different than everybody else. Maybe he didn't fit in with everybody else. People made fun of him, or people outcast him and this and that. And this is his revenge, or her revenge. That's why but that's what I say by a cathartic release.
Yeah.
I hope people who listen to it and read the lyrics get that feeling of release and after that, peace.
Yeah.
Because that's what we all have to chase at the end of the day.
Indeed. Yeah. So, yeah, there's a bunch more questions I have about different aspects of the album, but then going back a little bit to your last album back in 2018, I think it was, Corrupting
Correct.
Influence.
Correct.
So after that, you then had some lineup changes. Obviously, we had the COVID situation. I don't know how much of an impact that had on you and the band directly, but tell me a bit about, yeah. So tell me about that time period between Corrupting Influence and then getting to the point of being able to make the latest record.
Okay, so this is I kind of like telling this story. I've said it a lot in a lot of interviews. Chris McCarthy and Chris McCarthy's my writing partner. We started writing Settle All Scores probably in 2019. Like almost right after Corrupting Influence came out. We started writing it. And then COVID hit. And we had a lot of time in our houses to sit. And we had a lot of time where he'd come over to my house and we'd sit and we'd listen to what we wrote. And we threw out half an album, just tossed it out, because we were trying to, at least from my perspective, I was trying to push things to get more experimentation into the music. And it went too far. And it was Chris McCarthy who put the brakes on it. Said, this is going too far. We're losing the core internal bleeding sound. So we scrapped everything. I think we saved like 5 or 6 riffs and then started rewriting the album again. And we had a renewed sense of purpose when we started rewriting the album. And we tried to make everything we were using the word swagger. We were trying to have everything have as much like the most swagger-filled album that we could create, like just pure swagger and attitude. And what came out of it was all the riffs, and I still got to do my experimentation that I wanted to do, even though some of it maybe it blurs by to a listener. But there were things I wanted to do where I do a split chords, where I would play half a chord on one side and Chris would play the other half a chord on the other side, like the opening of the first track. That's a diminished 7th chord but like one side of the guitar is playing one thing, the other side of the guitar is playing the other half of the chord, and they come together and make a diminished seventh chord. Like that's kind of the experimentation I wanted to
Yeah,
do.
that's
So
cool.
I was allowed to get that. I was able to get that in, which satisfied my itch for doing something different, along with the end of that big ending in enforced compliance with the very Black Sabbathy kind of, with the shaker going on and all that
Yep.
stuff. So I got my licks in, but still the album has swagger, and even those parts that are a little experimental still have swagger to them. So um, I'm happy we rewrote everything and we put a real critical eye on things.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up enforced compliance because I was going to bring that up actually, and particularly about the ending of it. Because another thing that I sort of tied in with that was Empire of Terror. Like you have this really, really cool riff that comes in just at the end. And I was thinking with both of those tracks, it's like, the style that you have is not overly complicated, but it's still like it's not simplistic. So I love the way with like tracks like that. It's just like they're great tracks in themselves, but then you get towards the end, it's just suddenly like, here's this totally different thing. And it's like, all right, now we're done. Like you don't overplay it. I think
Right,
that's really cool.
right. Thank you. And I think we're the only slam band, quote unquote slam band that does stuff like that. That goes into a deep dive into the 1970s and does a 70s jam at the end of a song. And I think that sets us apart quite a bit. I think our riffs are superior, but that's another story. But I think stuff like that sets us apart. The beginning of deliberate desecration with the acoustic and that very Allison Chainsy riff where it comes in is very different. So I think that we've carved a niche for ourselves where if somebody listens to it, they go, "Yeah, that's internal bleeding."
Yep. Another thing that I wanted to highlight as well, and in a way, this sort of also goes back, to talk about Bill Toley a bit, because obviously he was a hugely important part of the band
Absolutely.
and huge, um, lineage and involved with the band for so long. And it's such tragic circumstances that you lost him. But now you've got Kyle Eddy, who I think came in for the last album, and he's amazing as well. Like I
Yes.
think one of the things I really appreciate with the band in general and with the latest album is that I feel with a lot of bands they'll kind of like over rely on the double bass pedaling. But with internal bleeding, it's like it's there. But again, going back to my previous thing about it not being overly complicated, but not being simplistic, it's like there's plenty of variety there. It's like basically any track on the latest record, you can just hone in on the drums and just really appreciate the different rhythms, the different fills, the different things he's doing. It's really cool.
Kyle did a great job. And what I really like about what Kyle did is he channeled Billy and also added his own flavor to it. So when I listen to that album, I can hear a lot of Billy's stuff. I mean, the single bass work. Billy was big on single bass, and I'm big on single bass. What the a single bass hit properly placed is more powerful than a double bass. Double bass, you lose the swagger. It's just, but if you have a single bass that's going, but da, ba, but da, ba, ba, but da, it's like, oh, it's so groovy. And Kyle was able to do that. And Kyle put his own twist on his fills and all that. So, and I talked to him about it, and he's like, I really want to respect Billy, but I want to do my own stuff. And I was like, you got to be able to do your own stuff. I don't, and Billy would want you to be able to do your own stuff. And he's like, and then we listened to his takes, and he's like, did I do a good job? And I'm like, are you kidding me? You killed it. And most of the takes he did in two takes. He really studied and he really came up with a lot of creative stuff. And um, I hope he gets a lot of credit for what he did because he's a fantastic drummer.
Yeah. No, definitely. It definitely comes through. The other thing I was going to mention as well was the bass playing. And that's, again, in general about the band, another aspect I appreciate because I feel that very often in metal, bass kind of gets lost. And I think that's also been a constant throughout all the different, members that have come through the band. You've always had the bass have its prominent part. And on the latest record as well, you've got like whether it's just the little breaks where you've just got the bass or just in general that sound, that bassiness. I think that's another thing that makes it really satisfying. And I guess in a way that's part of the swagger as well, like to use that term that you mentioned. It's that
It's
drive of the
absolutely,
bass.
yeah, it's absolutely part of the swagger. And it's also, to go back to Black Sabbath, it's my love of Geezer Butler. And I want the bass to have space. I mean, obviously, in fast, tight parts, you can't have the bass flying all over the place. They have to play the root notes. But when there's air in the riff, and Ryan is a very creative person, he came up with some great fills, great ways to complement the guitars, and that's what I want. That makes a fuller sound. That to your point, that adds more to the swagger. It makes the music more three-dimensional and more interesting. So, every instrument is important.
Yep.
Older death metal, I guess the bass wasn't very important. It just played the root notes and held down the guitar. And
Yeah.
I was never kind of in that school of thought.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know very different band, but another band that I often think of when I think of death metal and like making the most of bass is like Cryptopsy. Like particularly like None So Vile, for example. Like I
Oh yeah,
love it's just
100%.
so like having your, intestines ripped out.
Yeah. Agree. And God, are they such a good band? It's just, yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
agree.
an
I
amazing
agree.
drummer as well.
Oh yeah, Flo's the man. And he's the nicest guy on the planet too, which is great. We did a lot of in the early days, we played a lot of shows and did a lot of local touring up in Canada with Cryptopsy. So I have a lot of history with them and a lot of really fond memories.
Driving vans through the freezing cold Canadian winter.
Yes. So here's just one good story. Us and Dying Fetus shared a van together, and I think we played a show in Quebec City, and Cryptopsy was on that show too. And it was the middle of December. We played the show. We started going home. It started snowing. I mean, it was snowing. We couldn't see a foot in front of our face. We pulled the van over into a gas station because we were scared to drive. And we're in we're all in our 20s, and we were scared. And we woke up in the morning and the snow was above the windows of the van, We had
Fuck.
to wait for somebody to plow us out. It's crazy. Good times.
Yeah, I mean that's the kind of shit that you can die in. So
Yes. And you don't think about it, but you're like, fuck it. It's 5 below 0. We'll just maybe the van will keep running and we can keep the heat on and we'll see what happens.
whew.
And we all had a laugh, and we all got home safe, thank God. But
Yeah.
when you think about it, you're like, damn, that was crazy.
Yeah. But yeah, like you say, it's better if you don't think about it too much at the time. You just look back on it and you're like, all right, well, we got through that.
Yeah. It's good to look back on it now, though, because it's like when I talk to my kids, I tell them some of the crazy shit I did, and they just roll their eyes. They're like, what the fuck were you thinking?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know. I was stupid. I wanted to play music, and this is what you have to do.
Yep, for sure.
You know?
Another, like, it's partly a comment on the latest record and partly thinking about the way that your sound has evolved over the years. So I feel like, you've had a fairly consistent style despite the various different players that have come through the band. But something that I think is quite interesting listening to all of your records, I think they all, even with the first few that came out relatively close together, they all sound quite different, I would say, like in terms of the drum sound and just, maybe different sort of like textures and the way the vocals are and like where the guitars are sitting in the mix and stuff like that. And I think, first of all, that the latest record, I would say, is one of your best sounding records. Like I love, to talk about the guitars for one moment, there's just this kind of like peeling your face off kind of tone to the guitars. Like it's really nasty kind of tone, which I think
Yes.
is great.
Yes. Yes. That is all to the credit of Taylor Young, who reamped our guitars. We kind of told him what we wanted. And we're not producers or engineers. So me and Chris McCarthy just gave him like 1,000 adjectives. We just gave him a list of adjectives, and we said, yeah, this. And he came back with a tone that was just monstrous.
Yep.
And we're like, yes, this is what I've been chasing for years, and it went there. I agree with you. This is the best. This is the best we've ever sounded. And it's no fault to earlier producers because maybe they didn't understand or whatever. And we have a lot of modern technology now.
Yeah.
But Taylor really nailed what we wanted to do. And he was very thoughtful. I think that's the word. He was very thoughtful about what we were trying to achieve. So he would give us something and he would say, what do you think? And we would tell him, and again, we're not producers. And we'd say, this isn't obnoxious enough.
Yep.
It needs to be more obnoxious. We don't care if we lose clarity here if X is more obnoxious. And like he intuitively understood all that. And when we got the final mixes, I can remember me and Chris McCarthy sitting in his car going, wow, this is really over the top and just what we need.
Yeah.
And he just nailed it. And I'm really like the production is like, I'm really happy with the production. It's great. It's the first time I ever did an album like this where you record the drums in one place, you record the guitars in another place, you record the vocals in another place, and somebody puts it all together for you. Never did that before. And so it was frightening, but it was also cool because I was embracing something new and I had to learn a lot of stuff to be able to record at home, to be able to record proper guitars and this and that. And I did the work. I learned how to do it, and it worked out great. And it caused some interesting problems, because when you're at home, it doesn't cost money. So if you let's say you lay down a track and you're like, I'm not happy with it, you can do it 1,000 times over because it doesn't cost you a penny. And me and Chris made a conscious decision that if one of us did our track and we said it's good, we left it. We didn't say, oh, let me try to make it better. We left it, and because we wanted to try to still keep that organic feeling to things. So there's I can be perfectly frank, there's a couple of flubs on the album, but the take was good.
Yeah.
Maybe my fingering wasn't perfect, but the aggression and the pick attack was there.
Yeah.
So just leave it because it's good. So we were kind of conscious about that. And I'm glad we were, because the temptation to redo something 1,000 times is there when you're home.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I think that's a really cool insight, because it sort of expanded something that I was thinking and I was going to mention, like in terms of the sound in general, because I feel like, kind of to the point about modern technology, it's like there's so much available these days, but I feel sometimes, and just like taking extreme metal as an example, bands can sort of get too carried away with the possibilities of technology and things end up becoming kind of sterile. So
Yep.
like when you're talking about making things obnoxious, I think that really makes a lot of sense, because it's like you want to keep the visceral kind of nastiness of the music, but take advantage of the technology where you can. But I also think as well, like to your point about the temptation to redo stuff, is that like when you do that as well, sometimes things also become sterile. So it's like to have
Yes.
that sort of awareness to go like, maybe this is not perfect, but it's got like the feel that we need that's going to carry across.
Right. And that's exactly right. And also I mentioned it a little earlier. We said to Taylor, we don't care if you can't hear this riff 100%, like the notes. If it sounds obnoxious, we'd rather have it be obnoxious than the listener hear every fucking note. And I think you're right. I think a lot of people fall into that trap where they want perfect articulation. Everything's got to be perfect, and I don't want that. I want things to sound fat and ugly and nasty and visceral. I think you said visceral, right? I want things to be visceral and like, you just get that face when you hear it.
Yep.
And that's what I want. I don't want to hear every damn note. I don't care. If it sounds heavy, if it's brutal, that's the goal in my
Yeah. Going back, stepping back into the band's history, something I was curious about, and I'm sure you've talked about this many times before, but before the band broke up back in the early 2000s, when you had what ended up being Onward to Mecca. So I'm kind of curious to understand a bit how your involvement in the band went at that time. Because it's like, I think you were, if I've got this right, you were involved in writing the record, but then you left for the recording and then you came back afterwards. So tell me a bit about that whole time for you and then how the band ended up splitting for a while.
All right, that's a messy story. Um, I probably wrote half that album. No, yeah, I wrote half that album, and Guy Marché, who's now in Suffocation, wrote a bunch of that album, and then Frank Buffalino kind of finished the album after I left. I had left the band to start my own business, and I couldn't do both things at once because starting your own business is time consuming. So I stepped away. The band never really broke up, technically speaking. I mean, when Onward to Mecca came out, the band did 2 tours and then kind of fell into a period of inactivity. And I don't remember the year, whatever it was, I decided to reconstitute the band. It was in a period of inactivity, and I reconstituted things and wanted to continue. And that caused problems between me and J Lo, who was the vocalist on Onward to Mecca, because I had handed the reins to him. So there was a period that it was very uncomfortable. And I talked to Jay almost every day and explained why I was doing what I was doing and this and that. And we squashed our beef. And he's on the new album. I mean, how cool is that, right? We had a rational discussion like grown-up adults and hashed out our differences. And he abused me, and I deserve it because I usurped him, because I did give him the reins. I totally admit it. But I told him I said, Jay, at the end of the day, this is my baby. I gave birth to it, and this is my thing, and it has to go on because I have other goals. And he understood, and now we have a great relationship, and I help him with his new band with Punch Your Face, the band that he's in. And him and I talk movies all the time, and it's such so gratifying to have come full circle through that. It was a really tough period. And I was very upset about it because I didn't want Jerry. I called him Jerry back then. He calls himself Jay now, but whatever. I was very upset that he was so mad. And I'm just glad we got over it, and we're best of buds now. We talk about movies every day. What movie you
Yeah.
watch? Blah, 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 blah. And I've tried to keep that with almost every ex-member of the band. Even if we split with them acrimoniously, I've tried to mend fences or find common ground. And a few haven't wanted to do this, but many have. And I don't know. That's what you got to do when you look at your band as a family.
Yep.
Everybody is whether a guy was in the band for 2 years or 1 year, you shared an important part of your life with them, and that should be celebrated, not turned into shit. And I guess as I get older, I realize that you have to kind of look at it that way, because it's an important every step you take in life is an important step that you take. And you don't realize it when you're younger, but when you're older, you realize that was important.
Yeah.
So making amends and rekindling friendships and things like that is real important. Frank Rainey has always been a huge part of my life. There was no acrimony when he left the band or anything like that. and he's been my friend since we first got together. And keeping that friendship going is great. Keeping my friendship going with Jay is great. Keeping my friendship going with Joe Marchese, who was on Corrupting Influence, is awesome. Him and I talk about cars all the time because we have a shared love of cars. We're always talking about cars. To have these guys back on the album together, like that's a huge,
Yeah.
huge thing for me. And it's a huge thing for Chris McCarthy, who's put in a lot of work on this band for the past 15 years too. So it's just gratifying. That's the only word I can.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you told that story because I think, first of all, it's just great on a human level to hear something like that. And I think, from the outside, when you look at a band's history, like when you were telling me that story, it made me think of Fear Factory. And I was like, oh, it's just so sad that all of those guys, and kind of like the classic lineup of Fear Factory. First, it was like they were sort of split into two bands, and there was this whole thing about who is the real Fear Factory. And then Bert and Seabell as well ending up leaving the band as well. It just kind of feels like the history of that band has been a lot of acrimony. And maybe one day they'll all reconcile together. But I think that's really great to hear from you, like the effort that you've made to.
You know what the defining difference is? I'll tell you. I don't have to do this as a living. Guys in Fear Factory, they're doing it for my wife is refilling my bourbon. Hi.
Hi.
I'm sure the guys in Fear Factory are doing it for a living, so money is important. I'm not saying money's not important, but there's a
Yeah.
big difference. It's very liberating to do what I do and not have to do it for my living.
Yep.
It's incredibly liberating. And I don't have to worry about this guy stole this guy stole, because what's involved? $20,
Yep.
$50? Who cares? At the end of the day, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought up that too, because I also, you mentioned before about starting your own business, and I was curious to ask you from that kind of business point of view. Like, I think if I've got this right, around about the time of Internal Bleeding, maybe even before that, you got into advertising. So, did you always have that career all the way through your time making music?
Yes. Yeah. So even in the early, I was very fortunate in the early days to have employers who were very okay with me going on the road. And they would tell me, like, sounds so old, right? They'd be like, go to Kinko's at 11 o'clock. We're going to have a fax for you. Pick up the fax, send us back sketches of your ideas, write a bunch of headlines, and we'll make it work. So yeah, I was always in the advertising industry, and it was just great that my early employers were very supportive of my musical career. So the first tour we did, the owner of the company, his son wrote the movie Married to the Mob.
Hmm.
I don't know if you know that movie.
I'm aware of it. I don't think I've seen it, but I
Okay.
know of it.
So his son wrote the movie. I'll never forget this. He wrote the movie Married to the Mob. Anyway, I went to him and I said, Arthur, I have to quit. And he said, why are you quitting? I said, we got our first tour. This was our first tour with 6 Feet Under, Immolation. There was nothing going to stop me from doing this tour. And I said, this is my dream. This is what I've always wanted to do. And then he told me all the story about his son who graduated high school, went to California to pursue his dream, to write movies and, all this stuff. And he said, go. We'll cover you for a month. Don't worry about it. I'll call you when I need something. We'll figure out how to do it. Here's a beeper, blah, 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 blah. And it was awesome. I remember the day before I left for tour, they called me into the conference room. I'll never forget this. They called me into the conference room, and there were 4 portable coolers on the conference room table filled with food and drink. And they said, good luck. Take all this with you.
Oh man, that's so cool.
Yes. And my second employer was like that too. Very supportive. And it was, so I I'm very blessed in that respect. And then when I formed my own business and started doing my own thing, then I now with computers, I can work on the road. I can build websites on the road. I can tell my freelancers to do whatever they need to do wherever I am in the world. So it's very liberating.
And so again, this is kind of like something that I was really curious to ask you based on the long experience that you've had. And going back to what you were saying about the idea of settle all scores, I'm not asking you to name names, but I am interested because you've had a variety of different experiences with different record labels, and you've got your Maggot Stomp hoodie that you're wearing at the moment. Um, from that side of things, like different labels that you've had, if you could sort of like generalize or speak generally, how would you sort of like describe your experience with labels and like how much support you feel like you got from them, and maybe like how that compared to what you expected labels to provide over the years?
Oh, that's a really good question. Let me think. I mean, our first label, I'm not going to mention label names,
Sure.
but I'll just say our first label, when we came out of the gate, they were incredibly supportive. I mean, we got tour support, all this stuff, and it was awesome. And then the money dried up and things stunk. And then we moved on to another label and things kind of sucked. It was so businesslike and cold and impersonal and boring. And then we got to the label we were on previously to this album, which was a good label. And they were very professional and supported us nicely, but they didn't understand how to market, in my view, they didn't understand how to market us and I'm like, we all decided, we're like, let's just go back to the beginning. Can we find a label that's like Wild Rags, that just is into the bands and wants to be like a fan of the bands and know how to market the bands for their own unique individual sound. And that's how we ended up on Maggot Stomp, because Scott and I, him and I will go back and forth. He'll show me artwork. We developed, being that I'm into advertising and marketing, I developed an entire aesthetic for the band, a visual look, fonts, the whole 9 yards, very consistent. Scott understood it immediately. No other label ever understood it. Scott understood it immediately, and he's a fan of the band, and this is like where I want to be. I don't care if it's the biggest, it's not the biggest label in the world, but he's a fan of the band. And I'm looking at my texts right now on my computer. I have 6 texts from him waiting for answers about artwork, about this, about that. And I'm really appreciating that a lot more now.
Yeah.
So I guess to sum it up, I don't like I guess it's the factory style that a lot of labels do. They have a formula. They say, this is our formula. You're going to do this, 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 this. This is how we're going to promote it. This is what we're going to do, blah, blah, blah. And they stick you in that package without any thought about who you are, what you do, who your target audience is, who your fans are, how you're going to grow your fan base in the future. They don't look three-dimensionally. They look from their own one-dimensional standpoint, and I don't want it anymore.
Yeah. No, that's a great insight. Well, thinking then about the album, because you've got a variety of different formats that it's coming out on, and I think maybe you've soon to be selling out one particular sort of like special edition of the album. Tell me about the different formats that the album can be got on.
That's all Scott. That's all Scott's idea. He came up with all these crazy multicolored vinyls, which I think are awesome. Like, I want one of every, but he's like, I only made X amount of this. I made X. And this is what I love about him, right? I mean, this is creative. It's interesting. It's exciting. And he just comes up with he came up with this idea for baseball bats with our logo on it, and I love it. Like it's all, and that's all him. I'm too busy focused on like the primary things, the music, doing the interviews, doing this. But Scott's got this he's got this eye and he's got his ear to the ground that he knows what resonates, and his creativity is to be admired. And I guess as a small label, you need to have that because that's what distinguishes you from other people,
Yep.
So I have to give credit to him. I have no credit. I can't take any credit for myself for any of that stuff.
No, that's super cool. And I can sort of see, I mean, I can definitely see how that is going to be a great feeling to know that you have someone there who's doing that for you. And like you say, it doesn't have to be the biggest label, but just feeling like the support is there, the interest is there. It's like he's going to make the effort to come up with the creative ideas because he knows that's what's going to suit the band, rather than, like you say, this like factory model where they go, this is the way we do things and we're going to fit you into this because this is our
Right.
model.
I don't want to be stuck in a silo,
Yeah.
and I like the baseball bat thing. I can remember going back and forth about a couple of ideas because he was like, I want to do something cool, something, special, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I don't know, man. There's a million things we can do. And he's like, how about this? And he sends me a mock-up of a baseball bat with the IB logo on it. And I'm like, that's perfect. I mean, that sums up our music perfectly. I'm like, yes, this is great, you know?
Yeah.
And I guess even just like looking back, like nobody's ever done this kind of creative alternate versions and this and that. No label's ever done that for us.
Yeah.
Doing things that are specific to us that are absolutely totally in our wheelhouse and where we are and who we are. And he nails it. He understands who we are. And that's, at my age, that's more important than anything else.
Yeah. Oh, that's really, really cool. I like that a lot. So thinking then about the release of the record and then promoting it. So you've got a few live dates lined up. What have you got in the pipeline? And will this be the first time that you've played any of these songs on stage?
We played a couple of them experimentally a couple of months ago. We weren't 100% tight with them, but on this run, on the record release run, we'll do a couple of new songs, and we're excited to play them. And as we live other than Chris McCarthy, who lives near me, everybody else lives hours away from me. So finding jam time is tough. And I'm not going to say, everybody learn this song and then we're just going to play it, because we have to jam it, because we're a live band and the tempos that are on the album will shift when we play live. And that's one of the biggest defining differences for us. We don't use click tracks or anything like that. We play to the crowd and we react to the crowd, and Kyle sets the tempo to everything. So we need to play together. So as the more we can play together, the more new album songs we'll put into the repertoire, and we're not going to shortchange people by doing, this is an exact copy of the album, because that's just not how we roll.
Yeah, now that's really cool. That's also another great insight. And on that note, Chris, thank you so much. It was great to meet you, and it was a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for all of your insights.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the time, man.
Yeah, it was really cool to chat with you. And I love the album, so it's great to talk to people that make music that I love. So thank you very much.